One night, a cartel boss named Alejandro, known for being cold and extremely brutal, entered a bar far from downtown. His goal was to find a dealer who had betrayed him and stolen a valuable shipment. Alejandro hoped the man he was looking for was there. However, the only person Alejandro found was Lizzie, a young woman who worked at the bar. Based on the information he had, Lizzie was suspected of having connection to the man Alejandro was hunting. Frightened, Lizzie tried to explain what had actually happened. Lizzie said that Jensen wasn't even her boyfriend, but simply someone she had met once during a brief encounter that meant absolutely nothing. They had never communicated again after that. According to Lizzie, the incident shouldn't have had any consequences. But Alejandro wasn't interested in hearing her explanation at all. To him, even the slightest connection was enough to make Lizzie involved. Calm but intimidating, Alejandro pulled out a knife and made it clear that if Lizzie refused to cooperate, not only would she suffer, but her entire family would as well. The threat was delivered directly, leaving Lizzie even more panicked and terrified.
We'll keep coming back by your place. Forget sometimes. And that is sword trade. With your blood. You can't get away from me.
Without daring to fight back, Lizzie left the place carrying fear and uncertainty with her. A short while later, a bar security guard who had witnessed the entire incident decided to intervene. Believing he was only dealing with a criminal who liked intimidating people, the guard tried to stop Alejandro from leaving. However, that decision ended fatally. After that, the story completely left the violence-filled environment behind and shifted to a quiet, remote area surrounded by peaceful wilderness. This was where Baldry was introduced, a former spy who had left behind a life filled with dangerous missions to live a simple and peaceful life with his only daughter, Tag. They lived together in a small cabin in the middle of the forest, far from the noise of the city and any unnecessary contact with the outside world. Their life followed a simple and organized routine. Tag grew up under a style of parenting that was very different from most teenagers. Baldry was known for being extremely protective, but his approach wasn't about imposing common restrictions or lecturing her about socializing and parties. Instead, Baldry had taught Tag from a young age to be disciplined, always alert, and capable of protecting herself, including teaching her how to use firearms responsibly. For Tag, this lifestyle felt normal because she had grown up with it and felt safe with the rules her father had established.
Night, kid.
The next morning, Baldry started his day by praying in silence. It was a special day because it was Tag's birthday. Baldry prepared a simple cake and a gift that he was sure his daughter would appreciate. While Tag was still asleep, Baldry took the opportunity to go into town to buy some hunting supplies. At his usual store, Baldry found a lawn mower that, although it looked simple, was still in fairly good condition and easy to repair. With his practical attitude, Baldry negotiated the price and managed to buy it cheaply before returning to the cabin in the woods.
I like to piddle.
When he got there, Tag was already awake and immediately opened her birthday present. After carefully putting the gift away according to everything Tag had been taught, she decided to go to the nearby river to fish and enjoy the peaceful surroundings. While standing by the riverbank, Tag heard desperate screams coming from the direction of the flowing water. Tag immediately returned to the cabin to tell Baldry. The two of them then went together toward the river and found a young woman named January being swept away by the current.
Over there.
Look, I know it hurts. I'm gonna have...
Baldry immediately realized that the woman had suffered a gunshot wound. His first reaction was to take January to a hospital. However, January, barely conscious, begged him desperately not to do it. The fear clearly heard in her voice showed that January was running from something far more dangerous. With very limited medical equipment, Baldry did what he could to stop the bleeding and stabilize January's condition. Tag also helped as much as she could.
I'm sorry. Okay, get the kid above her. She got shot through the back. Help me. I am sorry about this. I am sorry. Me in here, so either get tough or get out. I'm sorry.
After January's wound was treated, Tag prepared warm chicken soup to help her regain some of her strength.
It's chicken soup.
That night, Baldry spoke with his daughter and warned her to keep her distance. January was a complete stranger they knew nothing about, had suffered serious injuries, and had a story that was still filled with mystery. Bowdry stressed that his top priority was making sure Tag remained safe and understood how serious the situation they were facing was.
Just keep her in bed. Give her a much.
Night, Bo.
The next morning, January woke up confused and realized that one of her hands was handcuffed to the bed frame. Calmly, Tag explained that it was part of the security protocol her father had put in place. Although she was initially surprised, January eventually understood that it wasn't an act of cruelty, but precaution because they didn't know who she was or who might be hunting her. While January rested, Bowdry went to a store in town to buy medicine and clean clothes. There, he met an old friend who served as the local sheriff named Brake. During the meeting, Bowdry was also introduced to Brake's new partner, a newly transferred police officer named Davenport.
I think she'll outlive me.
That night, when Tag was already asleep, January approached Bowdry, who was still awake. That was when she finally gathered enough strength to tell him what had really happened. January explained that when she came home from work, she found her roommate Lizzie being tortured by two masked men inside their apartment. Even though she had absolutely nothing to do with the situation, January was also injured in the attack. The two men then forcibly dragged both of them to the river and threw their bodies into the water. In desperation, January managed to break free for a moment. However, she was shot in the stomach before eventually falling into the river and being swept away by the current. Seriously injured, the attackers assumed January wouldn't survive and that her body would disappear, so they left her behind.
Put us in a car. And I left her there. I just started running.
As dawn began to break, Bowdry decided to follow the river to verify the story. During his search, Bowdry found Lizzie's body caught between branches near the riverbank. Realizing that the attackers could find out January was still alive if they discovered Lizzie's body there, Bowdry made the difficult decision to release the body back into the water, so it would be carried away by the current. Sometime later, Bowdry spoke with Tag and told her everything he had found while following the river. Bowdry explained how dangerous the situation they were facing was, including the body he had found. Bowdry also stressed that January's presence could put all of them in danger. Even so, Bowdry admitted that he was facing a dilemma. On one hand, Bowdry felt that turning January over to the authorities was the right thing to do. But on the other hand, Bowdry understood that the decision could be the same as sentencing January to death. Tag insisted that January needed to fully recover before any decision was made. Tag also stressed that leaving January in that condition was wrong. Seeing his daughter's determination, Bowdry finally agreed to wait a little longer. The days slowly passed, and January's condition began to show clear improvement.
I think I need to sit down. Oh, I don't feel too pretty. You're pretty. She died when I was little. Do you want your tea?
One night, January was finally able to leave the cabin without help. Although she was still weak, January found Bowdry sitting outside in silence, staring at the forest. With emotion, January expressed her gratitude to Bowdry and Tag for saving her life. January also admitted that without their help, her fate would have been much worse. Seeing that January's condition was improving, Bowdry realized he couldn't keep delaying the decision. Reluctantly, Bowdry explained that the next day, January would be taken to a clinic owned by an old friend he trusted deeply. Bowdry assured her that all the expenses would be covered and that January would remain under protection during her recovery. Although it wasn't the decision Bowdry had hoped for, January understood his concerns and accepted the plan, realizing that it was the best choice. That same night, far from where they were, Alejandro finally managed to capture Jensen. Alejandro kept Jensen completely under his control and tortured him with a series of brutal acts of violence to force him to confess.
I was coming back.
Did you get my shit?
Good luck.
Now, Academy. Delaney.
At this point, it was revealed that Jensen wasn't just a small-time criminal, but a corrupt police officer who had been secretly working for Alejandro. Jensen made sure the cartel's illegal operations could run without interference from law enforcement. In their final deal, Jensen chose to betray the cartel, steal the illegal goods, and disappear, believing he would never be found. Despite suffering severe injuries and being under extreme pressure, Jensen still refused to cooperate. To Alejandro, betrayal was a grave sin that could not be forgiven.
Don't hurt them, please. God. Oh, God.
Stop.
Trust me, I can make the runs. I can.
The next day, as originally planned, Bowdry got ready to take January to the clinic to continue her treatment. However, on the way there, their car was stopped several times because of an incident that had happened the night before. The officer conducting the checks was Sheriff Brake, an old acquaintance of Bowdry. At first, Bowdry remained calm and showed no signs of nervousness. During the conversation, Brake explained that while on patrol, he had found the body of a subordinate Jensen, which had been carried by the current to the riverbank. The case was still under investigation. Brake also added that the police had received another report about a second body found farther along the river. The body was later identified as Lizzie. The situation started making Bowdry uncomfortable when Brake revealed that investigators had looked into Lizzie's background and discovered that she lived in the same apartment as a close friend. According to neighbors, the two women had disappeared at the same time. As for Lizzie's friend January, the police had no concrete leads yet and were still trying to track her down. Davenport, Brake's new partner, added that investigators had also found footprints not far from where Lizzie's body was discovered. The finding indicated that January might still be alive and being treated by someone. At one point, Davenport noticed a woman who was with Bowdry from a distance and began to grow suspicious. Without hesitation, Bowdry firmly explained that the woman was his niece who had come from out of town to celebrate Tag's birthday. The explanation seemed enough to put a stop to their suspicions for the time being. However, the suspicious atmosphere made the clinic no longer feel like a safe place. Because of that, Bowdry decided to take January back to the cabin, believing it was still the safest place. There, January felt she could no longer hide the truth and revealed an important detail. On the night of the attack, one of the men had briefly removed his mask and directly threatened that she and Lizzie would be killed. That was when January managed to escape, but she was shot before eventually falling into the river and being carried away by the current. Hearing her confession, Bowdry realized that January was now a key witness. Bowdry was sure the attackers wouldn't stop looking for her. That belief was proven when night fell and two strangers arrived at the cabin. Bowdry immediately realized they were Alejandro's men. Bowdry remained calm and insisted that he had never seen any strange woman around the area. His firm attitude managed to convince the two men, and they eventually left. But the threat wasn't over. Sometime later, one of them secretly returned with the intention of killing January. Meanwhile, his partner waited in the car. However, that mistake allowed the man to be captured by Bowdry.
Wanna go home, bitch? Oh, you fucking up.
Don't.
It's me again. You didn't even matter, huh? Shut up. Tito, that's what's crazy.
After Tag fired a warning shot to prevent any resistance, Bowdry quickly eliminated the threat. To get rid of the evidence, Bowdry was forced to burn both bodies and leave their vehicle at an old, abandoned mine. The place was almost impossible for anyone to find. After returning to the cabin following the confrontation, January finally broke down emotionally and cried while apologizing. January felt that her presence had dragged Bowdry and Tag into an extremely dangerous situation. She was overwhelmed with guilt over everything that had happened. Bowdry tried to calm her down before eventually leaving to meet Sheriff Brake in private. During the meeting, Bowdry revealed the truth that the woman reported missing from the river was actually still alive and under his protection. Bowdry also stressed that Alejandro wouldn't give up and would continue sending his men to hunt January down. Therefore, Bowdry asked Brake to keep everything secret and help him get January out of the area as quickly as possible. Brake eventually agreed to the request.
Scared the hell out of us where she's at. Now we cannot be dragged into this. I can't be part.
Before they parted ways, Bowdry gave January some money to help her start a new life safely and far away from the area. As the sheriff's car carrying January began to drive away, Tag watched from a distance with tears in her eyes. Tag felt as if she had just lost one of her own family members. However, Tag understood that the painful separation was the only way to make sure January stayed alive. The The next morning, after waking up, Tag began to feel anxious because the silence around them felt increasingly suffocating. The lack of any news brought her fear back. Bowdry felt the same uneasiness and tried to contact Sheriff Brake. However, Bowdry discovered that the number was no longer active. With no other choice, Bowdry and Tag decided to go to the sheriff's office to look for him. While Tag waited in the car, Bowdry was greeted by Davenport, who seemed to have just come out of a morning meeting. However, Davenport didn't immediately answer when asked about Brake's whereabouts. Davenport spoke strangely and kept trying to change the subject. Davenport even hinted that Brake might have been involved with Jensen. The accusation made absolutely no sense to Bowdry because he had known Brake for years as an honest man who had never been willing to accept dirty money.
Hey, you were with them yesterday, weren't you? Or maybe there's something that you know that, or anybody for that matter. Okay, well, I'll tell you what.
That same night, while Bowdry and Tag were already asleep in the cabin, an unfamiliar car quietly stopped near the area. The driver turned out to be Davenport. Carrying a weapon, Davenport approached the cabin and carefully entered before he could do anything. Not long after, Davenport was tied to a chair with a lawnmower hanging directly in front of his face. Under heavy pressure, Davenport finally admitted the truth. Sheriff Brake had been killed, and January had been handed back to Alejandro not long after his last meeting with Bowdry. The confession hit Bowdry hard. After learning that his closest friend was dead and January was back in Alejandro's hands, Bowdry forced Davenport to reveal the cartel boss's hideout. When Davenport refused and tried to provoke him, Bowdry was forced to use violence to get the information. After Alejandro's location was discovered, Davenport was no longer of any value to Bowdry. Before leaving, Bowdry took the time to write a letter to Tag. Bowdry apologized because he felt he had failed to protect his daughter as he should have. He also told her that if he didn't return the next day, Tag had to go to her grandmother's house in Mexico.
I didn't feel that she deserved you or your forgiveness. I thought I was protecting you, but...
Bowdry then headed to an abandoned factory, bringing the badly wounded Davenport as leverage. There, Bowdry met Alejandro, who welcomed him with confidence. Alejandro issued threats and showed that he felt completely in control of the situation and was ready to kill Bowdry and his captive. Without her father's knowledge, Tag decided to secretly follow Bowdry. An armed confrontation became unavoidable. As Alejandro retreated farther into the building, Bowdry was shot in the chest and fell to the ground. One of Alejandro's men then approached to finish him off. However, Tag moved quickly. From a distance, Tag shot the man and saved her father's life. The action did reveal her position and prompted another enemy to chase her. Thinking quickly, Tag used the surrounding environment and left a rifle behind as a decoy. At the same time, the wounded Bowdry managed to get inside the factory. There, Bowdry found January still alive and learned that Jensen's wife and child were also being held as Sandra. While trying to find a key to free them, Alejandro suddenly appeared and stabbed Bowdry in the back. However, at the most critical moment, Tag appeared again and shot Alejandro, and his life for good. With Alejandro's death, the long burden they'd been facing finally came to an end. The confrontation left a heavy impact, and both Bowdry and January needed months to fully recover. As time passed, their lives slowly found new balance. Bowdry and Tag then invited January to stay with them at the cabin. They offered her something she had never had since that tragic night, a sense of safety, care, and a real chance to start her life over.